Chapter 15. On the Case. Friday's final lesson of the day was PE, and rumours were rife. Throughout the school, it was the only topic of discussion, and even the teacher, Mr. Tyler, who hated the pointless chatter of children, was enjoying the gossip, sending the young minds of the future into frenzied speculation. The team of super sleuths, who had more information than anyone else, were still none the wiser by the time classes had ended, and school was over for another week. Blaine was the last pupil to leave the boys' changing room, as he was spending extra time training on the school field, in a vain attempt to catch up with his ever-excelling slightly older brother. With his heart recently broken by Abigail Newman, he was determined to show the whole school that he was just as good as Hunter. Collecting his belongings, he couldn't be bothered to get changed back into his uniform, so he slung his bag over his shoulder and made his way to the exit of the long room. Passing the entrance to the shower blocks, he carried on up one side of the changing benches, which split the extended room into two. Adjacent to the exit was another door, which was open and painted dark green, with a reflective bronze sign that read, Mr. Tyler's office. Inside was a lavish, solid oak desk, far grander than the headmaster's, but it was completely ridiculous, because this space was smaller than Timothy Rowland's office. Picture frames hung parallel along the walls, including photos and newspaper clippings of the last 20 years, all containing an image or a reference to the PE teacher. Sat at his grand, elegant desk in a black posture-correcting executive chair, the teacher gazed up from his paperwork whilst biting into a crunchy red apple, when he heard a rap at his door. "I'll see you next week then, sir," said the well-mannered student, but as he turned to go, his teacher halted his exit and instructed him to take a seat, kicking the chair out from the opposite side with his foot. "I could have been a contender, like your old man," Mr. Tyler said, reminiscing, turning his attention to a team rugby photograph, which he kept in pride of place at his desk. "But Lady Luck saw fit to end my promising career as a fly-half, after I blew out my knee, and now I have to train others to live out my dream." A bitter tone started to run through the Rottweiler's speech, and changed back when the conversation flowed back to recent events. "You have a lot of potential, Mr. Montero, but you lack a killer instinct," observed the teacher, now sliding a large set of silvery metal keys in his direction. "I'm not going to lie to you. I stole these from our caretaker a few months back. Sometimes I randomly unlock doors that should remain locked." Now speaking in a helpful tone. "I do this, you see, solely to keep old Mr. Rowland on his toes." Informing the student it was him who was responsible all along for the magically opening doors, not the work of Headcase Harrington, like most paranoid pupils thought it was. Blaine was wondering why Mr. Tyler had suddenly decided to divulge this incriminating secret in a heart-to-heart, when the Rottweiler leaned over his desk. "I've trusted you to keep my secret. Now you can trust me with yours." Looking perplexed, Blaine's eyes scanned the room, not knowing where to look, until his sight fell on Mr. Tyler's fingers, isolating 3 different-sized keys from the bunch. "Now here's what you're going to do." The mission was simple. Locate and retrieve anything of monetary value from the art room that wasn't nailed down. Sort through all the suitcases, and if possible, make 2 or more trips, bringing any items of worth back to the boys' changing room. Instructing Blaine to take the shortcut through the swimming pool area, that door was the first to be locked in the evening, and the caretaker would not interfere, as he would be occupied at the other end of the school. From here he would be free to head along the adjoining corridors, ending up under the art room in the southwest block, and unlock any door as he went. The Rottweiler had seen Hunter stash a pile of suitcases in the supply room, but was unable to get a moment alone to search through the bags, as pupils and other teachers were always hovering nearby. By the time it was too late, he realised that he was the cause of his own undoing, because he had complained, refusing to cover any more art lessons. Consequently, it would have looked extremely suspicious if he had gone anywhere near the classroom without a good reason. Making it clear that under no circumstances, if he were to be caught to implicate his teacher, as he would deny all knowledge, Blaine had to instantly dispose of the caretaker's lost set of keys and lie to his capturer that he had simply forgotten his homework. "But that's stealing!" Blaine exclaimed. "And what Miss Cockleton did wasn't?" Mr. Tyler barked back in outrage. "That woman is probably spending the football team's kit money on spray tans and getting her hair and nails done. It makes me sick. No one will know your involvement. What people don't know can't hurt them. And I'm not saying a word." Ranting and raving, the Rottweiler's face went a familiar shade of red as his protruding veins came into view on his smooth forehead. He continued bad-mouthing the police, accusing them of being stupid and never being able to find her or the missing money. "I bet she's become one of those art missionaries," he added, "learning to paint with the colours of the wind and trying to find the perfect paintbrush for the soul. That kind of twaddle." Explaining the outcome of the last staff meeting, the Rottweiler asked Blaine, "Do you and the other boys on the team want to spend your free time making fairy cakes for a cake sale to raise money? I'm sure I can find a penny in your size, Montero." Wanting nothing more than just to go home, he refused, telling the Rottweiler if he needed money for new kits, he would ask his parents, and he was sure they would help. "Don't you dare," Mr. Tyler said, pointing a thick finger at him. "Well, not yet anyway." Getting up to leave, he apologised. I'm sorry, sir. I just can't do it. There must be another way." Expecting the PE teacher to hit the roof, he was calm and agreeable, and he predicted Blaine would never go through with it, but he thought there was no harm in asking. "I suppose I'll ask your brother then. There's no shame in being the runt of the litter," now speaking in a derogatory tone. "He can save the day and be the hero as usual. Thanks anyway. Off you go then, Flipper." Returning his gaze back to his notes and recommencing eating his crunchy apple, the Rottweiler felt his desk vibrate violently as a hand slammed down hard on the table and grabbed the collection of keys. "Fine, I'll do it. I'll show you who the runt is," Blaine snapped, sliding the keys to his pocket, almost scratching and taking the varnish off the lavish desk. He dumped his school bag on the chair and stormed off, angrily determined. Mr. Tyler leant back in his chair with his hands behind his head, grinning after successfully manipulating the 15-year-old boy. "Well, what do you know? Kids today are even more stupid than I thought. You just need to know what buttons to press," he gloated, then quickly darted his gaze to his perfectly polished desk, stroking and scrutinising, making sure the young thug hadn't marked it. 2 minutes later, there was another rap at the door, and the Rottweiler said stunned, "Well, was the plan a success?" Noticing the tall olive-skinned pupil at the door, the co-conspirator eager to see what his accomplice had discovered. "What plan?" the boy said, confused. Realising the student was wearing a white school shirt and a black leather jacket, it was Hunter, and he quickly corrected himself. "Oh, nothing. I was just thinking you may have discovered my—" He paused for a moment. "Game plan and scene." He then continued, "I wanted to know your opinion. Normally a year 11 is the team captain, but since you're my star player, I was thinking that honour should really be yours. What do you think?" Flattered, Hunter's posture went from sluggish teenager to proud overachiever in a second, and with a straight back he arrogantly accepted. "Well, it does make perfect sense when you think about it logically. What I actually wanted to know was, have you seen Blaine?" he said. "He should have been finished by now." Gary Tyler shrugged his shoulders, giving himself some time to concoct a story. He needed him out the way quickly, as he knew Hunter would relish having dirt on him, and would quite happily sell him out and use it against him. "Oh yes, he said he was in a rush to get back home. Looked like he was on an important mission," he fabricated. Now including Hunter in his deceit, his web of lies grew wider, and before Hunter noticed, the teacher reached out with the tip of his shoe, placed it underneath the chair in front of him, which held Blaine's school bag, and dragged it back underneath the desk, obscuring the evidence from Hunter's sight. "Must be really important. I best find him. He'll probably end up needing my help," Hunter said pompously. The Rottweiler strongly disagreed. "I'm sure there's no need. I can't have my best player worrying about trivial things. Blaine's a big boy. Whatever it is, I'm sure he's on the case." A half grin formed, making one side of Gary Tyler's face wrinkle, impressed with his clandestine pun. Hunter was not amused at the thought of being stood up by his brother, but that was Blaine. He was probably doing his care in the community and hanging out with that loser Mason. He left the office in a curiously angry mood, but couldn't understand why. He had just been given fantastic news. His talents were being noticed. If the football team won the Inter-School Cup, he would be the centre of attention. It was a typical week at school. He was adored by girls, feared by the unpopular kids, and praised by his teachers, but he still couldn't shake the strange feeling that someone had really upset him. Doubt clouded Hunter's mind, wanting to make sure Blaine had really left, as he couldn't help but sense there was something uncertain in Mr. Tyler's story that rendered it untrue, and he headed away from the south block and ventured his way to the school field to make sure his brother wasn't waiting for him there. Stood all alone, his heated feelings of sadness disappeared, just as if someone had flicked off a switch. But bizarrely, when he made his way back to the school, the strong surplus emotion returned, growing stronger with every step. He reached the fire exit door at the back of the swimming pool and pulled it open. "What are you doing here?" yelled a suspicious voice. Aged in his late 50s, Royston Skinner was the current caretaker. He looked rather pleased with himself to have caught an errant student. "Caught you red-handed. Now hand over those stolen keys. I could have you arrested, you know," he said. "What are you babbling on about, old-timer?" Hunter shouted, shocking himself in the process. He hadn't intended to snap at the caretaker, but his body was alive with excess livid aggression, and he couldn't help himself. Royston stuck out his large prominent chin as he lowered his small rectangular spectacles, squinting over the top of them, and then sat them back on his nose. Most people joked that they knew whenever the caretaker was near. His chin appeared first, and about half an hour later he would arrive. "Why, if it isn't Hunter Montero! I thought I saw you sneak through here no more than 5 minutes ago. They always return to the scene of the crime. Now, hand them over," Royston demanded. Hunter tried to apologize. The caretaker declared, "So you confess!" But Hunter was merely making amends for his outburst. Unable to locate his lost bunch of keys, Royston swore blind he had locked this door already, and it was either Hunter or a lookalike who had reopened it. "You must have seen my brother. It must have been him," Hunter realized. But the caretaker was refusing to believe that polite, respectable Blaine would ever steal school property. Blaine had always greeted the sour-faced caretaker with a smile and a cheery hello, even when an inconsiderate youth had knocked over boxes of molecular model building kits, which cascaded over a table onto the floor, sending plastic atom and bond parts rolling everywhere around the science lab. Blaine was the only student who stopped and offered a helping hand. Unable to find the incriminating keys, the caretaker sneered. "So you got lucky this time, boy. But I'm not going to lose my job because of spoilt, overprivileged brats like you. Now, get gone." Wasting no time, Hunter followed Blaine's trail and disappeared into the pool area. Closing the door behind the rude adolescent, Royston locked the door once more, then reached inside his long steel grey overcoat, removing a long heavy-duty chain, wrapped it around the handles several times, and sealed it with a big chunky padlock bow, then shook the doors to make sure the exit was impassable. "Try and open it now," he dared. Hunter's mood of anger had now started to pass, and he started to experience another unrelated sensation. Unsure of what he was feeling, a sense of nerves flowed through his body, making him shiver, and the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Normally so confident, but he twitched and jumped whenever he heard the slightest noise. Bizarrely, he also felt suddenly hungry, and even at one point he felt compelled to hide behind a wall when he saw silhouettes of people pass by. But he knew one thing was true deep down in his gut. His brother was nearby. Winding through the maze of corridors, chattering voices could be heard, and he saw people descending a set of stairs and heading towards the car park. Hunter, who would have been spotted through the glass, found a nearby door that was ajar and dived into the room. "What's going on with me?" the bemused boy asked himself as he felt a repetitive tapping on his forehead while secluded in darkness. Reaching out to grab this annoyance, his sense of touch discovered it to be a pull cord, and he tugged it. A dim low-voltage light bulb flickered on and began to swing ever so slightly. Looking around, Hunter found he had, for some unknown reason, decided to hide in the caretaker's mop cupboard. Due to his compulsive action, he had knocked over a bottle of what looked to be industrial bleach, and it had leaked on his expensive Italian-made footwear. Cursing, he located and picked up a scrap of material and began to wipe furiously, ebbing the liquid away from his shoe, while standing on one leg, supporting himself by leaning on a shelf. Not predicting the stability of the ledge, it came clean away from the wall. He lost his balance, slipped, and his free remaining leg buckled under a mop, and he fell to the floor in a heap. Spooked, he turned his body towards the door, looked around, and he realized he was probably lying in the exact same spot where the police had found Headcase Harrington all those years ago. But now the sense of panic was real, and very much his own. Holding up the cloth, he inspected the contents of his hand, and his eyes bulged as he let out a silent scream. The coast was clear, just as the Rottweiler had predicted. Blaine thought he had made it safely to the art room without anyone seeing or following him. Letting out a sigh of relief, he recognized that the easy part was over. The real challenge would be whether or not he could find anything of value and drag the prized possessions back. Checking to make sure there wasn't a teacher in Miss Cockleton's office, he knocked on the door maintaining the pretense that he was just a forgetful student, in case he was discovered and interrogated. The tiny office was a mess. All the drawers had been completely emptied. It looked as though the whole room had been searched from top to bottom. No doubt the result of a terrified and frantic headmaster who might lose his job, Blaine guessed. Creeping over to the other corner of the room, he passed the whiteboard and stopped suddenly between Miss Cockleton's desk and the square set of 4 tables in the middle of the room, where the Year 9's giant nature sculpture stood. He heard a harmonic ping noise echoing from the supply cupboard. Jumping, he saw his distorted reflection straight ahead in Abigail's mirror-like banner, and focusing, he tried to steady his nerves and calm himself. He swallowed his fear and made his way over to the door for Phase 2 of the mission. Abruptly forcing the door so it opened wide enough for him to fit through, he bent down to pick up a random suitcase that was dumped on the floor. Learning from Hunter's experience of dragging the cases up the stairs, Blaine braced himself before endeavouring to pick one up. But to his surprise, it was empty and light as a feather. Clutching another, he found this one too was empty, and proceeded to lift the others. All were void of any contents. He removed and hauled the mountain of luggage from one side of the room to the other. Moving the last case, he had still found and discovered nothing, until he heard the noise again, emanating from inside the wall near the ground. He knocked at the hollow surface, disturbing a piece of hardboard that concealed the entrance, and in doing so established the source of the clinking chime, as it looked back at him with powerful, sombre, globular eyes.